Okay, so I'm here with Judge Hendricks, and I have two of the facilitators that are on my approved list. Their agencies are on my approved list. So I'm going to ask you both to introduce yourselves, tell us a little about your training and how you became facilitators, and then we'll go from there. How about let's start with Jason Badgett.
Hi, my name is Jason Badgett. I am currently the court liaison, domestic violence and substance abuse facilitator for Perception Counseling. And how I started all this. Okay. I started as a person who has had a history of things. I completed treatment and decided that it would be easier for me to go into this type of environment to help other people in my situations and things like that. I started in 2013. So far, I've collected a Duluth certificate. I run the Duluth education program. I also run moral recognition therapy for domestic violence and substance abuse here at Perception. I have a bachelor's degree in psychology with a minor in substance abuse and currently working on my master's degree for psychology.
Great, thank you, Jason. All right, how about you, Javi?
Yeah, my name is Javi Ramirez. I'm the Director of Men's Engagement for Emerge Center Against Domestic Abuse. And our men's engagement team, we have a men's education program, which is an abusive partner intervention program that is on Judge Million's approved list of providers here in Tucson. And I also help with overseeing some of the other engaging men and boys preventative work here in Tucson as part of our organization. I became involved in this work in 2018 when I was referred by my community for causing harm to my partner at the time into our men's education program. And I appreciated the model and approach around a community accountability for men in general. And much like what you just said, Jason, I came to the end and was fortunate enough to be offered an opportunity to continue this work. And I continue to do this work from the approach that I believe all men have an opportunity to take a closer look at the ways that we participate in men's violence. And yeah, that hasn't stopped or changed for me since then, 5 years later.
Thank you. And Jason is with the agency Perception, and then Perception and Men's Education Program are two of the 6 agencies on my approved DV court list. So I'll start with the questions. And what advantages do you get by working with the judge and her staff at review hearings and in general? And we'll start with you, Jason.
Communication. I think the review hearings themselves are a way that the person that's going through this in that moment has understood that everybody's working on the same team and that there's help when in prior instances that there wouldn't be. It's not like you're just giving these things and there's no circumstances whatsoever. If you finish them, you finish them. You don't, you don't. The review hearings are part of the communication part of it, where the client knows that things are going to be said, things are going to be done, and the way the progression moves is, they gauge the progression on what this guy's doing in treatment or how they're doing and how they're going about things. I believe that's the biggest thing that I've understood about this is everybody's on the same page with it. So it's not a just, here's your sentence, this is what you're going to do, and if you do it, you don't. It's more or less that let's get you not to do this again so you have a better quality of life in the future.
Yeah, we hear that a lot. We heard that a couple of times today at review hearings, that men will tell me a lot at these review hearings. It not only changed my relationship, Judge, it changed my relationship with my neighbors. Like I was telling me today, it changed my relationship with the people at work, with everybody. And so I love hearing that. And I know the facilitators like to hear that too, because it
Absolutely
really makes our work meaningful. Javi, do you have anything to add to that question about the advantages of being on the list, and coming to the review hearings?
Yeah, I definitely think communication is a big part of it. Our program, we're a community-based program, and we talk a lot about how we're not part of the legal system and we're just men in a community. And so I think being able to partner and come to review hearings, I'll often hear Judge Millian say things and reinforce things from our progress reports that from your stakeholder perspective as the court is something that we couldn't speak to as a community agency. And so I feel like it creates further accountability from different stakeholders. And it's helpful for us to be able to have visibility into that too, how the men are interacting, how Judge Millian, you're reinforcing some of the things that we're saying in the reports. For other courts where we're not able to attend review hearings, it's sometimes like we're just sending a report into the void and we never hear back. It's kind of one directional. So it definitely helps us in our facilitation. And I think the men see it too, right? They see it kind of a unified front of support and accountability.
Yeah, I think so. I think I'm going to have Judge Hendricks ask this next question and tell you to be honest with your answers.
So what are the pros and cons, or what do you like or not like with regard to being a preferred provider and also attending the court hearings? Anything that you would say kind of is difficult for you as a provider?
What I like about it is the accountability that is addressed within the review hearings. If the person in question isn't being accountable, then there is a discussion on that. Or if they're lacking in some different ways, then it can be addressed in those points. What I don't like, I really.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I will put it that it's a lot of work. The way we do reports, sometimes it kind of, I think there could be a more efficient way or streamlined way, but I think that's more on our end of things. Maybe getting the list a day earlier than where we're at right now. Sometimes we get them on Thursdays. Sometimes, I think most of the time it's on Thursday or Wednesday afternoon. Just that little added extra time could be the ability to make sure that they're out on time, That way the counselor in question has a little bit more time to reflect on what the client is, and they can say a little bit more on the report at that time.
Thank you. And Javi?
Yeah, I think, that having sort of like a baseline guardrails of, hey, these are the standards that all of us as approved providers are going to meet. And, I think like in terms of like, we're only going to do one group a week. There's a certain number of allotted absences, those kinds of things prior to the having that list. Some guys who I felt like would really need the structured support of our program or a program like ours would go to a different program where they could do 2 groups a week or didn't have minimum absences. And I just think that was a huge, create a lot of risk. And this really addresses that in a major way. So I love that. I also love, like, I think, and we saw it in the review hearing earlier today. Judge, you were referring to it, right? There was a guy who came to our information meeting, felt really challenged because he felt like it was going to be a lot of work. And during the review hearing, Judge Millian was able to encourage him, hey, like, I think you should go back to that program. I think it's going to be a good fit for you. For our program, we don't have control over that kind of thing, but it is useful to be on a list where, the judge can make those kinds of calls and has that sort of investment of like, this program over here is going to be a good fit with MEP or with Jason at Perceptions. That kind of thing is really helpful. As far as what I don't like, I don't know. I don't think I necessarily have anything. I always love to have as much information as possible about a man who's coming into our program, but I don't think that is always something that even the court themselves have something that they have control over, right? So I don't know that there's anything that I dislike. I'm trying to be honest, I promise.
No, I appreciate it. I do want to just digress just a second and say what I love about having all the treatment providers there too is like we had a guy come in today and he's like, I called everyone on your list and nobody called me back and nobody would take me. And so I signed up with this other agency that is like not on my list. And I'm like, I've got all these people here and we all know that you're not telling the truth because I know what they do and their intake process. And sometimes they don't call back right away, but you can't tell me that everyone on my list is not responding to you because they're on my list and they know they have to respond to me, basically.
Correct.
So, Judge Hendricks, do you want to ask one of these other questions? We're running out of time on our self-imposed time limit, so I'll let you decide what you want to know.
Yeah, I want to just back up to something that's far more basic than what we've been talking about. One of the challenges for my court and other limited jurisdiction courts is that the defendants are struggling with housing. They may be not working, and so they have a money issue when it comes to treatment. And so I'm always interested in hearing how agencies who are successful, how are you dealing with that issue when the client says, I can't pay or I don't have enough? How are you handling that, and how is that handled in review?
So I do know Emerge has a sliding scale for pay, whereas Perception does not. But even with that being said, there are things that we could do to help that individual. I know some of them that are on actual adult probation, we can ask for copays or something like that. But in the senses that we don't have those type of things, we can lower the amount that the individual pays weekly. We don't try to let them build up a huge balance, although some of them do have that, but we don't usually try to let them do. But I'm not going to ask somebody not to come to group. I'm going to ask them to show up anyway, even if that class is particularly free, because I don't want them to stop coming to treatment because of financial reasons. I think the treatment itself is more important than the finances in those moments. So.
Thank you. Thank you. Javi, did you want to add in something?
Yeah, our program, so we're lucky enough to be grant funded. We're, as I said earlier, a nonprofit survivor serving agency. So our men's education program is fully grant funded, and we do have, it's not a sliding scale, but we call it a donation, right? And the men set it themselves based on what feels like a meaningful amount for them to contribute to a program ultimately in funds that are going to go back into resources that are serving survivors in the community. So it's a way for us to reinforce our own investment and stake as men doing this work and this program. And I know that that's a privilege for our agency to be grant funded, but I do think there's something to be said about how to make the program accessible. And I'm understanding that a lot of programs are for-profit businesses and, have to make a bottom line, unfortunately. But, I do think there's a diverse way of funding your program. There's funding out there. And if there's ways to sort of make it more accessible, I think that's better in the long run. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
What would you tell other DV treatment providers who want to work with courts?
Open communication is key. Having a relationship where we can communicate with the judge and, even the court service monitors at that time is, I believe, is honestly the key to all this. It's, if I haven't, if there's a client that's presenting an issue or struggling with something and I reach out and it's like, maybe he might not benefit here more. He might benefit to another agency a little bit better, or he might be struggling with other issues besides domestic violence, or, he could be struggling with addiction or something like that. Then it's see if we can put him on drops or maybe put him in another ILP program on another agency or something like that. So I think in that case, having that open communication helps all the way around in more of a holistic approach to things. So.
I say do it. It's a vital step to to creating, and I think like holistic community stakeholder response to addressing violence, not just for like your individual agency, but as a community, right? Sometimes we get really siloed in just our own work with individuals and we forget about the broader community. I think working with the court and having this kind of model really helps us to see the full scope of what's happening in our community and being able to have open communication, as you're saying, Jason, with all the providers who are doing the work.
And I just want to say what's really important, I think, in our model too, is that all of you have a way to refer dangerous people if there's to emerge, right? So what they have is a way that if they think there's problematic issues with the offender that they have in their groups, then they can send a referral form to Emerge, and Emerge can follow up with the survivor. So that to me is another big piece where the court isn't involved, but having the advocates be a piece of this is really important also.
Also on the reverse side of that, I mean, I've had advocates reach out to me as well from people that are in my group, and it's not, we don't address the issue per se with that person, but we address the issue within the group setting. So, it's like, let's address this, let's work on this, and as a whole in the group and not really specifying that particular person out, but that communication going on where, this gentleman might be presenting one way in group, but in the house or in the home or outside of the treatment agency, he's not working on the things that we're discussing. And I think that alone we can bring it back into the group setting at that point and be like, hey, we need you guys to work on this a little bit more, and report back to us of what you're finding, as you're going through these tools and using these things. So that also helps that recidivism be reduced in those moments.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys. Do you have anything else, Judge Hendricks? Because we're
I have about 1,000 more questions, but maybe a different time, but I do appreciate you both participating. Thank you.
Yeah, I do too. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.